All right, everyone. This is the part where I get to introduce Delegate Emily Shetty, and I'm just going to read her bio real quick. Emily Shetty is a member of the Maryland House of Delegates. She represents District 18 with a professional background in health policy and advocacy. She has served on the House Judiciary Committee and currently serves on the Appropriations Committee and as chair of the Health and Social Services Subcommittee. She was also appointed by the House Speaker to serve as chair of the Democratic Caucus. Born in Fairfax, Virginia to immigrant parents and raised by a single mother, with inspiration and encouragement, Delegate Shetty has continued to serve her community. After obtaining her law degree from Catholic University, going on to launch a small consulting and advocacy business, she currently teaches at the University of Maryland, College Park. Please join me today in welcoming Delegate Emily Shetty. Thank you for being here today. And so we're gonna have to share this mic, because yeah. So first question, can you introduce yourself and share how your experience has shaped your approach to policy making, particularly your work on initiatives addressing childhood hunger?
Sure. Hi everyone, can you hear me? Yes. Great. Hi, I'm Emily. It's so nice to be here with you all today. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for engaging this really important subject. First, I want to take a moment to say hello and introduce my husband, Ash Shetty, who's here in the front row. He works nearby. He happens to be the Chief Procurement Officer for Montgomery County, so some of you may know him from his important work here in the county. I was born in Fairfax, as you mentioned, but I grew up in North Carolina. And shortly after we moved there, my father left, and my mother and grandmother raised my sister and I. And for large portions of our childhood, we actually lived in poverty. We were fortunate to have a roof over our heads. We were fortunate to have scholarships to attend a school in the community. But we struggled with making bills. And this was despite my mom having worked 3 minimum wage jobs while she was going through school to become a nurse. And I recall some pretty visceral memories, which is really what has been like the driving force for a lot of the policy work that I do today. So one memory I have is of us having our hot water heater break one summer. And we couldn't afford to replace it. And so what we would do every morning is we would fill empty jugs of water and we'd put them in our backyard, and we would move them as the sun moved, right? Like, so that they were never really in the shade. And then they would warm up, and then in the evening we would be able to take a bath. And that lasted for quite a while until we were able to afford a new hot water heater. And honestly, that hot water heater remained until just 3 years ago. I replaced it for my mom. You know, these unexpected expenses that come up when you're living paycheck to paycheck really, really deeply impact families, they impact children. We struggle to make ends meet, we were receiving food stamps for a large portion of my childhood as well. And that was in part because my father wasn't consistent with paying child support. And so I learned a lot from that. I learned how hard my mom worked didn't necessarily make a difference in terms of you know, being able to afford the necessities, right? Being able to afford hot water, heat. We didn't have heat growing up. We used a lot of space heaters. We didn't have air conditioning. But she worked so many hours, and it didn't change the game for her or us. And this was in North Carolina, where the cost of living is substantially lower than it is here in Montgomery County. The other thing I learned that I'm still struggling with from a policy level today is how much our systems punish people for being poor. It is deeply, deeply unfair. And so one example of this that still exists in our policy today is when custodial parents apply for benefits, if they are receiving child support, they're punished twice. So one, their income, the child support amount they're supposed to receive is sort of calculated as part of their income, whether or not they receive it. And then when maybe their non-custodial parent is in arrears, so the custodial parent is on food stamps or receiving SNAP because they are not getting child support, because they don't have the means to cover food for their children, then the non-custodial parent pays arrears to catch up. Maybe they apply for a passport and they're forced to, or maybe some other court order comes in and they're forced to. Then the government withholds a huge amount of it, sort of for the privilege of the custodial parent having received benefits at all. So they're being punished twice, and that is deeply unfair. And it happened to my family years ago, I'm 40 now, so 30 years ago and more, and it still happens to children in Maryland today, children and families. And so this is a policy that I've raised several times at every single budget hearing with our Department of Human Services, really trying to figure out how we can hone in and improve this issue for families in Maryland. And this is something that I'm partnering with the administration on, or I'd like to partner with them on for next year to address.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Next question. Your role as a Maryland State Delegate allows you to shape legislation that directly impacts families and children, including policies related to nutrition and food access. How do you view the legislature's role in addressing childhood hunger, and what specific measures do you believe are the most effective in tackling this issue at the state level?
Thank you so much. It's such a great question. We all know, this is a friendly audience, right? We all know the important, critical role that the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program plays for families, for our local economies even, and for our communities writ large. No one wants to see families and children go hungry. That's just a universal truth. And we were fortunate during the pandemic to see a significant increase in the benefits that families received every month. But once those benefits dried up, we had to figure out what we were going to do at the state level to make sure that families did not suffer, were not punished because we weren't receiving the federal aid that we had once received. And so we passed two pieces of legislation this year to increase benefits to targeted communities. I think we'd love to do more. I led a bill, a horrible bill number, just by luck, it was HB 666. But I led a bill that at its introduction would have raised the minimum benefit that families receive from $23 to $95 a month. $23 won't get you a cartload of groceries. It just won't. And $95 is not much either, but it would have been a significant improvement. Unfortunately, when we introduced that bill, the fiscal note that came back was really, really high. And we were unable to find ways in our budget to cover the costs for that. So what we did instead is we worked on an administration bill that will draw down $60 million of federal aid for summer EBT that will help 500,000 children statewide. So we worked on that, and then within our budget for my subcommittee, which happens, it's a relatively large percentage of the entire state budget. So our state budget is about $63 billion. 40% of it goes to agencies within my subcommittee. So health, human services, aging, those are the three big ones. We have some smaller agencies in there as well, but their budgets are significantly smaller. But as you can imagine, human services and the programs we're talking about today comprise a significant portion of our state budget. So we worked with the agency and the General Assembly to find money for this new program to launch, while at the same time reducing the fiscal note for my bill to only $1 million of new money a year. And what that new bill will do is actually we lower the age of eligibility for a state supplemental SNAP benefit to 60. So we already had 62 and up were receiving a small state supplement, and we increased the benefit. So we were able to cover between the two bills, and for like only $1 million of new money, 539,000 Marylanders will receive expanded benefits under these two bills. So really proud. A long way of getting to the answer, but yes, legislation makes a big impact. It helps us shape policy, but also direct spending to important programs that help people.
I think that I speak for us all when I say thank you, for fighting from various angles to see what to do to make sure that people are getting those benefits. So as the chair of the Health and Social Services Subcommittee and Appropriations, you hold significant influence over budget allocations. How do you prioritize funding for programs that are aimed at combating childhood hunger and childhood poverty within the state's budgetary constraints? Can you discuss any challenges or successes you've encountered in securing funding for such initiatives? I know you mentioned some of the barriers already, but if you could just give us a bit more.
Yeah, this is a great question. So I think appropriations used to be a really fun committee to serve on when we had a lot of money, right? Then you have a lot more wiggle room. You can move things, you can prioritize what you need, you can get some really interesting, innovative projects launched. Now we're in a very different situation. But truthfully, I find it more interesting because it really allows us to hone in on what our values are as a state, right? What do we care about? Who do we care about? Who needs the most help? And we prioritize from there. So we're really fortunate. So I've served for 6 years now, my first 4 under the former governor, Larry Hogan, and my last 2 under Governor Moore. It is night and day. Not just, from one major perspective of the way that the agencies work with the legislature is 180 degrees different. The prior administration had instructed their agencies to not communicate with legislators. On day 1 of the Moore administration, they issued the opposite memorandum. They said, the legislators are partners in this work, you are to work with them. That makes a big difference. The other thing to note is that the Moore administration has prioritized childhood poverty as one of their core issues that they worked on. They had several administration bills that they had proposed speaking specifically to that. And several of those bills went through my committee. So that was really exciting to get to work with this administration on tackling this major issue that we all care deeply about. So the budget process starts with the executive branch, as it does here in the county, and at the federal level. In the past, the governor had the power to almost unilaterally decide what the priorities would be, how money would be distributed. But now, thanks to the passage of an amendment to our Constitution, the legislature has a role too. So not only, in the past we could only cut programs, we couldn't add to anything. So if Governor Hogan sent a program to us, or a budget to us that deprioritized childhood hunger, there was not a lot we could do in that budget year. Now, we work in partnership with our agencies to figure out exactly what their priorities are, make sure that they match with ours, and we fund them accordingly. And thankfully, our priorities are shared when it comes to childhood poverty and childhood hunger. So as I mentioned, the administration had a proposal for the summer EBT bill that would really significantly expand access to benefits and build upon the summer SNAP program that has been very successful. But it was a lot. It was a huge amount of money, not a lot of initial transparency in like how that money would be spent. And so I worked very closely with the administration trying to understand every dollar, how they would allocate it, and then see if there was any wiggle room. Could we do this so that we could have more money for expanding SNAP benefits elsewhere? Could we, do all these different creative ideas? And thankfully, we were able to work in partnership to do that. I think in the past it had been challenging to get that type of information to begin with, right? Like if you don't have any transparency in how money is going to be spent, you don't have a way to really meaningfully engage in a dialogue and shape that policy. So, so we're very fortunate. We're in a very different position now with a governor that shares our priorities.
Yes, yes. Thanks for sharing that. Thank you. And I think one of the things that I like about Montgomery County is that we currently have Marc Elrich, who's been very committed to this work, and so I really appreciate the commitment of his administration, the creation of a county office of Citizens Resilience, which I think is very progressive. Not a lot of local governments are doing that,
yeah.
And so it's very, very, I love to hear when there are synergies that way. It makes the work go faster and easier. Not that it's easy work, but it makes collaboration something that can be done. All right, Ed Marie, how am I doing with time?
6 minutes.
Oh, okay, I'll try to squeeze 2 more questions in.
Let's do it.
So what advice do you have for organizations and community members who want to advocate for legislation relating to child hunger issues? And what help do you need from your constituents in the legislative process?
That's always such a great question, and frankly, it's my favorite question because I love when people get engaged in policies that matter to them and matter to our communities. So one of the best things you can do as an advocate is to seek out champions that are already doing this work in the legislature and ask them directly what help they need. So in some instances, it's really, really helpful to have a lot of written testimony, a lot of examples of stories of how a bill would benefit. If you have an idea for a new bill, right now, my colleagues and I are kind of like sort of decompressing from session. Although I did get my first, so what are you planning on working on next year question yesterday. I was like, oh my goodness, it's been a week. So I think talking to people, asking what they're thinking about, identifying problems in this time of the calendar year, and trying to, say like you want to partner with them on figuring out a solution that could help. That's really valuable to legislators because you all are experts in this field. You're doing this work, and we are there to enhance and support your efforts in Annapolis. I love to say that advocates have one job and legislators have another, right? You all are doing the work, you guys are seeing what's happening on the ground, you can identify the problems, you can come to us and bring that voice to us, and it's our job to make those bill ideas pass.
Right.
And so working together is the only way to do that.
Yes. All right, so one last question.
Let's do it.
I kept this one as optional if we have time, and we do. As a parent of a child in elementary school, you understand firsthand the importance of access to nutritious meals for students. Could you share your perspectives on the significance of initiatives like Healthy School Meals for All, both in terms of improving academic outcomes and addressing food insecurity among school-aged children? Additionally, how do you envision further enhancing meal programs within Maryland schools to better support students' health and well-being?
Thank you. This is such a great question. So we're really, really proud parents of an 8-year-old who attends, he's in 2nd grade at Rosemary Hills. And when he was in kindergarten, I believe, the federal government had put in a lot of money to subsidize sort of universal school meals. And my son loved it. I had been packing his lunch and like every day, and then once his teacher sort of showed him how he could pick his own food, like how he could do it, he just was like, Mommy, I want you to never pack a lunch ever again. Which frankly, like, I kind of appreciate, because I hated washing the dirty lunch boxes so much. So it's been, so from a parent's perspective, like, having universal school meals is great. But it was really reassuring to know that he was getting healthy food, that he was empowered to select what he wanted. Like, that's a really important life skill. And we're fortunate to be able to afford to make his meals at home. But it's just, we recognize that that's not true for many children. And so, you know, there are a lot of children that are kind of in this cusp of, they're not quite at the free and reduced price meals level, but they're also not really wealthy enough to be able to bring in nutritious foods every day into school. And so it's those kids that I really worry a lot about. So making sure that kids are getting access to healthy meals at lunch, even at breakfast, it just starts their day off better. They have better, we were just joking about this, our son gets very hangry when he's like the sweetest, calmest kid, but when he's really hungry, he gets so mad. And since he was an infant, like bright red cheeks just screaming at us, you know, and we know anecdotally, but even with data, that like behavioral health problems, and academic challenges stem a lot from hunger, right? Like, we're not our best when we're hungry. And so giving children access to meals is so, so critical. We are in a very difficult fiscal situation at the state level. And so expanding these benefits is a value and a priority of ours, but until we have the federal government available to partner with us on actually paying for it's going to be really, really challenging. So I think you know, elections matter. Not to make this political, but they matter a lot. And so November is going to matter this year, and every other November. And it's just really critical that we are electing people who care about these issues and are going to prioritize them at the federal level and at the state level.
And I thank you for caring about this issue. Thank you so much for being with us here today. We really appreciate you being here and sharing your thoughts with us, and you know, some of the work that's happening at the state level. Please join me in thanking Delegate Emily Shetty. All right. Before I pass it on to Anne Marie, this morning I was getting ready, and my daughter said, "Where are you going?" And I didn't know how to explain, you know, what I was going to do. So I said to her, I said, "I'm going to talk to a bunch of people about